March 7, 1965, 11:23 p.m. The Garden Room, the Sands Hotel, Las Vegas, Nevada. Here is what you need to understand before we begin. Frank Sinatra had been told by 13 separate people in 13 separate conversations over the preceding 6 months some version of the same sentence. The sentence was, "You're finished." Not always those words. The words varied. Sometimes it was, "The market has moved past you, Frank." Sometimes it was, "The kids want something different now." Sometimes it was said without any words at all, said in the specific language of unreturned calls, of meetings that never got scheduled, of the slow, professional withdrawal of people who have decided that proximity to you is no longer advantageous. 13 people. Some of them were enemies. Most of them were not. Most of them were pragmatists, men and women who had looked at the numbers, at the charts, at the demographics of a music industry that was reorienting itself around the British invasion and the folk revival and the sound of a generation that wanted to be angry and wanted to be electric and did not, apparently, want to hear a 49-year-old man in a tuxedo sing about being alone at 3 in the morning. The pragmatists were not wrong about the numbers. They were catastrophically wrong about the man, because on the night of March 7, 1965, at 11:23 p.m., in the garden room of the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, Frank Sinatra is sitting at a corner table with a glass of Jack Daniels and a newspaper, and the specific, settled composure of a wolf who has been told by a committee of sheep that wolves are no longer relevant. He is reading the entertainment section. He sets the paper down. He looks at the room, he picks up the paper again, and on page 7 of the Las Vegas Review-Journal's entertainment section, in a column by a writer named Douglas Keane, who covers the music industry with the cheerful brutality of someone who genuinely believes they are being helpful, there is a paragraph that reads as follows: "With the British invasion showing no signs of slowing, industry observers are increasingly asking whether the Sinatra model, the lone vocalist, the live orchestra, the adult contemporary sensibility, has a future in the American market." Sources close to several major label negotiations suggest that the chairman's leverage, once considered absolute, has diminished significantly. One executive, speaking anonymously, described the situation plainly. "Frank had his moment. The moment has passed." Frank Sinatra reads this paragraph twice. He folds the newspaper carefully, the specific, unhurried fold of a man who treats objects with respect, regardless of what they contain, and he sets it on the table beside his glass. He finishes his Jack Daniels. He signals the waiter for the check. He looks at his watch. 11:31 p.m. He leaves the garden room. He takes the elevator to the 9th floor. He goes to suite 912. He closes the door. He sits by the window. He looks at Las Vegas below, the Strip blazing with the cheerful, indifferent light of a city that has never stopped for any one man's difficulty and does not intend to start now. He picks up the telephone. He calls Jilly Rizzo. "Jilly," he says, "I need you to do something for me." The 90 minutes begin at 11:35 p.m. By 1:05 a.m., 13 problems will have become 13 solutions. Let us be precise about who the 13 are. Because the 13 are not villains. This is the first thing you must understand, and it is the most important thing, because the story of what happens in 90 minutes is not a story about destroying villains. It is a story about correcting pragmatists who have made the wrong calculation. The first, a Capitol Records executive named Howard Mercer, who has been quietly redirecting promotional resources toward younger acts for 8 months, not publicly, not with a formal announcement. Simply, the budget that used to support Sinatra's releases has been shifted, incrementally, to other priorities. Howard Mercer is not malicious. He is responsive to market data, and the market data in early 1965 suggests that the adult contemporary market is contracting. The second and third, Robert Alderman and Gene Park, 2 television producers who were developing a variety special around Sinatra 18 months ago, and who have, in the past 6 months, allowed those conversations to become increasingly vague, increasingly unscheduled, increasingly theoretical. They believe genuinely that a Sinatra television special will not achieve the ratings that justify the production cost in 1965's competitive environment. The fourth, Danny Kessler, Sinatra's own booking agent for non-Las Vegas engagements, who has been accepting lower fees for Carnegie Hall dates and East Coast tour stops than Sinatra authorized, on the grounds that the market will not support the authorized fee. He has not told Sinatra this. He has simply accepted the lower fees and remitted the lower amount, with paperwork that, examined quickly, appears normal. The fifth through ninth, 5 entertainment journalists and columnists in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, who have, over the past 6 months, written pieces that range from mildly skeptical to openly dismissive about Sinatra's commercial prospects. Some of these pieces were written in good faith. Some were written because the anonymous executive from the Review Journal column is a real person who has been making the same statement. Frank had his moment, the moment has passed, to anyone in the entertainment press who will listen. The anonymous executive is the 10th, a man named Martin Schreiber at a mid-level record distribution company who has a personal grievance against Sinatra dating to 1961, when Sinatra declined to appear at a benefit event that Schreiber was organizing. Schreiber has spent 4 years carefully, methodically, placing this sentence, "Frank had his moment," in the right ears, at the right moments, with the patience of a man who understands that reputation is built and destroyed incrementally, not all at once. The 11th, a Las Vegas hotel executive at a competing property who has been approaching the Rat Pack's individual members about exclusive arrangements that would make them unavailable to perform at the Sands. Not openly competitive, carefully, gradually, through the language of friendship and better terms. The 12th, a music publisher who controls several songs in Sinatra's standard rotation and who has been, for the past year, licensing those songs to other artists at preferential rates, making it easier, commercially, for younger singers to record Sinatra's material than for Sinatra himself to re-record it. The 13th, Douglas Keane, the columnist, who is not malicious and not strategic and not part of any coordinated effort. He is simply a man who writes what he believes, and what he believes, in March 1965, is that Frank Sinatra's best years are behind him. He is wrong. But he doesn't know he's wrong. He is about to find out. 11:35 p.m., Suite 912, the Sands Hotel. Jilly Rizzo is the most comprehensively informed person in Frank Sinatra's orbit. This is not an accident. Jilly Rizzo, born Ermenegildo Rizzo in New York City, has spent 20 years attending the events and the dinners and the after parties and the industry meetings where information is exchanged, has spent 20 years listening more than talking, remembering more than he seems to remember, filing in the specific filing system of a man who understands that information is the primary currency of any serious professional life. When Sinatra calls at 11:35 p.m. and says, "I need you to do something for me," Jilly says, "Tell me what you need." Sinatra describes the 13, not with the anger of a man who has been wronged, with the precision of a man who has spent 3 hours reading a newspaper and thinking about mathematics. "I need to understand the full situation," he says. "Every one of these people, what they need, what they owe, who they answer to, what they're afraid of." "Frank," Jilly says, "I already know most of this. Tell me." And Jilly tells him. What Jilly tells him, over the next 22 minutes, the notebook filling up with Sinatra's small, precise handwriting, is the full map of the 13, not their animosity, their needs. Because Jilly Rizzo, who is not a violent man and not a theatrical man, understands the fundamental principle that Frank Sinatra is about to apply. You do not defeat your enemies by attacking their strength. You defeat them by making them dependent on yours. Howard Mercer at Capitol Records needs a hit. He has been redirecting promotional resources toward younger acts because the younger acts are performing commercially. But 3 of his biggest bets in the past 18 months have underperformed significantly. He needs a win. He needs the kind of win that justifies his position. The kind of win that a Frank Sinatra album, properly recorded and properly promoted, routinely provides. Robert Alderman and Gene Park need a television special that will justify their production company's overhead. They have 2 projects in development that are not coming together. They need content. Danny Kessler needs his agency relationship to survive the discovery of what he has been doing with the fees. This discovery has not yet happened. But the documentation exists, and Martin Green, Sinatra's forensic accountant, has, in a different context, begun a review that will find it within 60 days. The 5 journalists need access. Entertainment journalists live and die on access, on being in the room, on getting the quote, on having the relationship that produces the story that other journalists don't have. They have been writing skeptical pieces, in part because the access has been reduced. When you cannot get the interview, you write around it, and writing around it tends toward the speculative and the skeptical. Martin Schreiber needs something he will never admit he needs. He needs to be forgiven. The grievance from 1961 is not professional, it is personal. His benefit event was for a cause that mattered to him. Being declined, publicly, by the person he most wanted to attend, damaged something in him that 4 years of strategic reputation management has not healed. He has been doing this not for professional advantage, but out of wound. The Las Vegas competitor needs performers. He has approached Rat Pack members individually because he cannot approach them collectively. Collectively, they are impregnable. Individually, the terms he can offer are attractive enough to create uncertainty. The music publisher needs catalog. He has been licensing Sinatra material to younger artists because the younger artists are recording it, and recordings generate performance royalties. But the most valuable thing he has in his catalog is Sinatra's voice on those songs, and Sinatra has not re-recorded the most commercially significant ones since the early 1960s. Douglas Keane needs to be right. This is the simplest and most human of all the 13 needs. He is a journalist who has made a prediction. He needs the prediction to be correct, because being wrong in the specific ecosystem of entertainment journalism has lasting professional consequences. Sinatra listens to all of this. He says nothing for 40 seconds after Jilly finishes. Then he says, "Give me the list in order. Most time-sensitive first." Jilly gives it. Sinatra writes. He looks at the list. He says, 67 minutes. For what? To solve all 13, 67 minutes and 8 phone calls. Jilly, who has known Frank Sinatra for 20 years, says, "Make it 9. I want to make one of them." "Which one?" "Schreiber," Jilly says. "I'll handle Schreiber." A pause. Then Sinatra says, "All right, you take Schreiber, I'll take the rest." He picks up the telephone. 12:02 a.m. Call 1, Howard Mercer, Capitol Records. Howard Mercer picks up his home phone in Los Angeles with the automatic alertness of a record executive who knows that late calls are rarely trivial. He hears Frank Sinatra's voice. "Howard, I've been thinking about the album." The album. The album that has been discussed for 14 months and has not been scheduled, because Howard Mercer has been directing resources elsewhere and because the project has been sitting in the particular limbo of things that everyone agrees are good ideas and no one prioritizes. "Frank, I've been thinking about what it should sound like, not what the market wants, what it should sound like. I've been listening to the arrangements Nelson did in '58, and I think we've been missing something. I think we've been trying to make the kind of record that the charts want, instead of the kind of record that will still be played in 30 years, and I want to make the second kind." Howard Mercer is quiet for a moment. He is, beneath his market responsiveness, a man who went into the music business because he loved music. He has been spending 18 months making decisions based on charts. He is, in this moment, being reminded why he got into the room in the first place. "When do you want to record?" he asks. "Next month," Sinatra says. "Nelson is available. Bill Miller is available. I want to go into the studio and make something that sounds like a man talking to you at 3 in the morning about everything that matters. Can you give me that?" "Yes," Mercer says. He says it before he finishes deciding to say it. "Yes, Frank, we can give you that." "Good," Sinatra says. Get me your best promotional team, not the ones you've been putting on the British acts. Your best. He hangs up. Call 1, 31 minutes. Problem 1, solved. Howard Mercer will, in the weeks that follow, redirect the Capitol promotional infrastructure back toward the Sinatra project with the specific urgency of a man who has been reminded what he is actually capable of. The album they make together, it will be called September of My Years, and it will win the Grammy Award for Album of the Year in 1966, and it will be the record that demonstrates comprehensively and permanently that the obituaries were premature. 12:08 a.m. Call 2, Robert Alderman and Gene Park, both men on a conference call. Sinatra has asked the operator to connect both lines simultaneously, which in 1965 is a technically impressive request that the Sands Hotel's switchboard manages with professional pride. Gentlemen, the television special. Frank, the numbers on Variety. I'm not doing Variety, Sinatra says. I'm doing something different. I want to do an hour of nothing but music. No comedy sketches, no celebrity guests, no production numbers with dancing girls. Just me, an orchestra, and the songs, shot like a film. Like a documentary of someone performing at the absolute peak of what's possible. A silence. That's, Alderman starts. Unprecedented. Park finishes. Yes, Sinatra says, that's the point. Another silence. The kind that contains two men reconsidering everything they thought they knew about what a television special could be. We'd need a network commitment, Alderman says. I'll get you the network, Sinatra says. You get me the production. We'll talk next week. He hangs up. The special they make, Frank Sinatra, A Man and His Music, will air on NBC in November 1965. It will win the Emmy Award for Outstanding Musical Program. It will be watched by approximately 22 million people. It will be the program that demonstrates to an industry that had begun to believe its own narrative that the audience for Frank Sinatra is not a diminishing demographic, but a vast and underserved one. 12:14 a.m. Call 3, Danny Kessler. This call is different in character from the first two. The first two were offers, the deployment of Sinatra's genuine creative vision in service of people who needed what he had. This call is a correction. Danny, Frank, I was just thinking about, I'm going to have Martin Green call you tomorrow morning, Sinatra says. He's going to ask you some questions about the Carnegie Hall fee structure over the past 14 months. I'd like you to answer them completely and accurately. The silence on Danny Kessler's end of the line is a specific kind of silence. It is the silence of a man who has been operating on the assumption that something would not be noticed, discovering that it has been noticed. Frank, Danny, I'm not going to make this complicated. Martin is going to find what he finds. When he finds it, you and I are going to have a conversation about whether we continue to work together. That conversation will go better if Martin's conversation with you goes well. Do you understand? Yes, Kessler says. Good night, Danny. He hangs up. Danny Kessler will cooperate with Martin Green's review. The review will find the fee discrepancies. The discrepancies will be corrected, restitution made with interest, and Danny Kessler will continue as Sinatra's East Coast booking agent, working under a new contract with significantly more oversight and significantly less discretion. He will never undercharge again. 12:21 a.m. Calls 4 through 8, the 5 journalists. These 5 calls are the most precise and the most delicate, because journalists are the most complicated of the 13. You cannot buy journalists, not the real ones, not the ones who matter. You cannot threaten them without making the story worse. You can only do what Sinatra does. You give them something better than what they have. He calls each of them personally. Not through a publicist, not through a manager, not through any of the intermediary mechanisms that celebrities typically use to manage press relationships. He calls them himself at midnight or later, in the voice that they recognize immediately, the voice that has been on their radio and their record players since they were young enough to have had the music shape them. He says to each of them some version of the same thing. I've been reading your work. I think you've been writing what you believe is true, and I respect that. I want to offer you something. Come to the April session at Capitol, sit in the booth, watch how the record gets made. Write what you see, exactly as you see it, no restrictions. If what you see confirms what you've been writing, write that. If it doesn't, write that. I want you there. 5 journalists, 5 invitations to the recording session. 5 journalists who have been writing about a man they haven't had access to for the better part of a year, being offered unrestricted access to what will be the most significant recording session of the year. Not one of them says no. The pieces they write after the April session, in publications ranging from the New York Times to Downbeat to Esquire, are not promotional pieces. They are exactly what Sinatra asked for, what they saw as they saw it. What they saw happens to be a man recording an album called September of My Years, with the absolute commitment of a craftsman who has been told the world has moved past him and has decided, with characteristic specificity, to be better than the world. The pieces they write after the April session do not say, Frank had his moment and the moment has passed. They say, the moment is happening right now, in Studio B at Capitol Records, and you are not here for it, and that is your loss. 12:28 a.m. A different telephone, a different call. While Sinatra is making calls 7 and 8, while the last 2 journalists are receiving their invitations, Gilly Rizzo, in New York, is making the 9th call. He is calling Martin Schreiber. Martin Schreiber picks up the phone with the specific alertness of a man who does not receive late calls from numbers he recognizes and is therefore surprised when the voice on the other end is a voice he knows. Martin, it's Gilly. Gilly, a pause. The specific pause of a man calibrating the situation. It's late. I know. I'm calling because I want to tell you something, and I want to tell it to you myself, which is why I'm calling this late, instead of waiting until morning, when I'd probably change my mind. Another pause. Go ahead. Frank knows about the sentence. The "his moment has passed" sentence. He knows you've been putting it around. A longer pause. I'm not calling to threaten you, Martin. That's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because I've known you for 15 years, and I think you're a good man who's been carrying something for 4 years that was never as important as you made it. Frank not coming to your benefit wasn't about you. You know that. You've always known that. He was in the middle of something that week that I can't tell you about, but it wasn't about dismissing you or your cause. It was about logistics. Silence. The sentence stops. Gilly says, not because we're telling you to stop, because you don't actually believe it. You never believed it. You were saying it because it hurt to be turned down by someone who mattered to you. I understand that, but it's been 4 years, and it's time to let it go. A very long silence. Then Martin Schreiber says, if he wanted to explain, he doesn't explain. Gilly says, he plays. Come to the April session at Capitol. Come hear what he's making, and then tell me if you still believe his moment has passed. The call lasts 11 more minutes. At the end of it, Martin Schreiber has agreed to come to the Capitol session. He will hear the album being made. He will stop placing the sentence. He will, in a conversation several months later, apologize directly to Sinatra at a dinner in New York. Sinatra will accept the apology with the specific, unhurried grace of a man who has not been keeping score, because keeping score requires attention that he prefers to spend elsewhere. 12:41 a.m. Call 8. The Las Vegas competitor. The Las Vegas hotel executive, who has been approaching Rat Pack members individually, is a man named Victor Hollis, who manages a competing property with the specific, unembarrassed ambition of someone who has decided that what the Sands has, he should also have. Sinatra's call to Hollis at 12:41 in the morning is the most elegant of the 9. It does not address the individual approaches to Rat Pack members. That would require acknowledging the approaches, which would require Hollis to deny them, which would produce an unproductive conversation that ends in mutual distrust. Instead, Sinatra offers Hollis something. Victor, I've been thinking about the market, the way Las Vegas is going in the next 5 years. I think the properties that are going to win are the ones that figure out how to work together instead of fighting over the same performers. Hollis is quiet. Hollis is calculating. I want to propose something, Sinatra continues. A joint benefit, both properties, combined audience, all the proceeds to the hospital building fund. I do one night at the Sands. I do one night at your property. We share the publicity, share the goodwill, share the credit. You'd perform at my property, if the arrangement is right, and if the arrangement is right, I think we both benefit more than we would from whatever other arrangement you might have been considering. The specific weight of the last sentence, whatever other arrangement you might have been considering, is not a threat. It is a demonstration that Sinatra knows, that Sinatra is choosing, deliberately and with full knowledge, the constructive option over the confrontational one. Hollis accepts the proposal. The poaching of Rat Pack members ends that night. 9:49 a.m. The publisher. Gerald Morris controls the publishing rights to 14 songs in Sinatra's core repertoire. He has been licensing them to younger artists at preferential rates because the younger artists are recording, and Sinatra has not re-recorded these songs in years. Sinatra's solution to Gerald Morris is perhaps the most direct of the night. Gerald, I want to re-record 12 songs in the next 18 months, your catalogue. I want to put them on record with the current arrangements, the best arrangements anyone has ever heard for these songs. We do this together, with proper royalty structuring, and your catalogue becomes the catalogue, not a resource for cover versions, the definitive versions. Morris listens. Morris calculates. Morris understands that a Sinatra recording is, in the specific mathematics of music publishing, worth approximately 40 times what any other recording of the same song is worth, in perpetuity, because Sinatra recordings are not of the moment, they are of the permanent record. Let me look at the catalogue, Morris says. Call me Monday. Good night, Gerald, Sinatra says. He hangs up. He looks at his notebook. He draws a line through the last name on the list. He looks at his watch. 1:02 a.m. 87 minutes. 9 calls. 1 made by Jilly. 8 made by Sinatra himself. 13 problems. 13 solutions. Not confrontations. Solutions. Each one addressing the actual underlying issue, deploying the actual available resource, producing an outcome that serves both parties better than the alternative. You do not defeat your enemies by attacking their strength. You defeat them by making them dependent on yours. What happens after 1:02 a.m. on March 8, 1965, is not dramatic. It does not happen in a single night or a single week. It happens the way all real corrections happen, over months, in the ordinary flow of professional life, in the specific and cumulative way that decisions produce consequences. Howard Mercer redirects the Capitol promotional infrastructure. The April recording sessions happen. September of My Years is recorded in April and May 1965. It is released in September. It is the most complete artistic and commercial statement Sinatra has made since In the Wee Small Hours. The Grammy, in February 1966, is unanimous. Alderman and Park develop A Man and His Music. They go to NBC with a proposal for a special that has no precedent in television history. An hour of nothing but a man and an orchestra and the songs. NBC, surprisingly and then not surprisingly, says yes. The special airs in November. 22 million viewers. The Emmy follows. The 5 journalists attend the April Capitol session. They write what they see. What they see is not what they expected to see, and the pieces they write say so, with the specific, journalistic honesty that Sinatra asked for and that he trusted them to provide. Danny Kessler cooperates with Martin Green's review. The discrepancies are corrected. The agency relationship continues under new terms. Martin Schreiber attends the Capitol session. He does not place the sentence again. The sentence, Frank had his moment. The moment has passed, disappears from the entertainment press as quietly and completely as it appeared, because the source of it has stopped being its source. Victor Hollis organizes the joint benefit. It raises $240,000 for the hospital building fund. Both properties benefit from the publicity. The individual approaches to Rat Pack members stop. Gerald Morris calls on Monday. They develop a re-recording schedule. The recordings happen. The catalogue that was being licensed to cover artists becomes, in the language of music publishing, the definitive catalogue, the one all other recordings are measured against. Douglas Keane writes a piece in September 1965 about the September of My Years album. It is the most admiring thing he has written about anyone in 10 years. He does not acknowledge his earlier skepticism. He does not need to. The album is the answer to the question he asked in March, and the answer is so complete that the question is no longer interesting. People ask, when they hear this story, about the 13. They ask, what happened to them? Were they punished? Were they destroyed? Did Sinatra ruin them? And the answer is no. None of the 13 were destroyed. None of them were punished. Howard Mercer's career at Capitol continued and improved. The Sinatra album was the biggest commercial and critical success of his tenure. Alderman and Parks production company was revitalized by the Emmy-winning special. Kessler continued as a booking agent. The 5 journalists continued writing, with more access and better sources, because they had demonstrated that they could be trusted with unrestricted observation. Schreiber organized his next benefit event, and it was, in no small part because of Frank Sinatra's presence at it, the most successful one he had held. Hollis ran his hotel. Morris ran his publishing company. Keane continued writing his column. None of them were destroyed. All of them were corrected. This is the lesson of the wolf. The wolf does not destroy the sheep who call him irrelevant. The wolf has no interest in the opinions of sheep. The wolf is interested only in the mathematics of his own survival and his own excellence, and the mathematics of his own survival and his own excellence happen to produce, as a byproduct, the comprehensive demonstration that the opinions of the sheep were wrong. The most dangerous man in any room is not the one who is angry. It is the one who is patient. It is the one who sits with the newspaper folded on the table beside the empty glass and looks at Las Vegas below and thinks for 11 minutes about the sequence. Frank Sinatra, on the night of March 7th into March 8th, 1965, was patient for exactly 90 minutes. In those 90 minutes, he made 8 calls, Jilly made 1, and the mathematics of the situation rearranged itself around a central fact that the 13 had temporarily lost sight of. Frank Sinatra was not finished. He had never been finished. He was, at 49 years old, at the beginning of what would be the most significant artistic phase of his career. The albums and the television and the performances of the late 1960s that would establish permanently and beyond the possibility of revision that he was not a man of a moment, but a man of an era, of the American century, of the permanent record. The moment had not passed. The moment was about to begin. The mathematics of the 90 minutes are worth examining precisely, because precision is the only honesty available to a story like this. Sinatra identified 13 problems. He categorized them not by the offense they represented, not by how wrong they were, not by how much they had hurt him, but by the underlying need each one expressed. Howard Mercer needed a hit. The journalists needed access. Kessler needed to be caught before he could be corrected. Schreiber needed to be forgiven. Hollis needed to be offered something better than what he was pursuing. He addressed each need with the specific resource available to him that matched it, not force, resource, his creative vision for Mercer and the television producers, his access and trust for the journalists, his accounting infrastructure for Kessler, his friendship network for Schreiber, his leverage and his generosity for Hollis and Morris. In every case, the solution served both parties. Mercer got his hit. The journalists got their access. Kessler got to continue working. Schreiber got to stop carrying a wound. Hollis got a better arrangement than the one he was pursuing. In every case, Sinatra got what he needed too: the promotional infrastructure, the critical reappraisal, the financial correction, the end of the reputation campaign, the protection of his Rat Pack relationships, the revitalization of his catalogue. This is not generosity. It is, as Sinatra would have said, with the specific directness of a man who has never confused clarity with cruelty, mathematics. The most efficient solution to any problem is the one that converts the problem into an asset. The 13 who thought he was finished became, by 1:02 a.m. on March 8, 1965, the 13 who made him his most significant, the label that delivered the Grammy-winning album, the producers who made the Emmy-winning special, the journalists who documented the comeback that was not a comeback because it was never an ending, the booking agent who now worked honestly, the man who stopped placing the sentence, the competitor who became a collaborator, the publisher whose catalogue became definitive. The wolf, in other words, did not eat the sheep. He taught the sheep to work for him. This is mathematics. This is patience. This is the cold, precise, inexhaustible intelligence of a man who was told by 13 separate people that his moment had passed, and who responded by making the next moment the greatest of his career. September of My Years was released in September 1965. It won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year in 1966. It is considered by many critics to be the finest album of Frank Sinatra's career. Frank Sinatra, A Man and His Music, aired on NBC on November 24, 1965. It was watched by 22 million people. It won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Musical Program of the Year. Douglas Keane's review of September of My Years appeared in the Las Vegas Review-Journal in October 1965. It was the most admiring piece he had written about any performer in a decade. Martin Schreiber attended the April Capitol session. He stopped placing the sentence. Howard Mercer was promoted to Executive Vice President at Capitol Records in 1967, in part on the strength of the Sinatra album's commercial and critical performance. Robert Alderman and Gene Parks' production company produced 3 additional Emmy-nominated specials before the end of the decade. Danny Kessler continued as East Coast booking agent until 1971, working under a contract that contained audit rights exercised quarterly. The joint benefit organized by Sinatra and Victor Hollis raised $240,000 for the Clark County Hospital Building Fund. It became an annual event. Gerald Morris's publishing catalog was re-recorded by Sinatra over the following 3 years. The recordings remain, in the specific language of music publishing, the definitive versions. Frank Sinatra performed at the Sands Hotel 107 times over the course of his relationship with the property. He always tipped the musicians extravagantly. He always knew their names. He never told anyone about the 90 minutes. He didn't need to. The mathematics told the story by themselves.